Okay, so let's talk about just some terminology um, to make sure that we're clear on the basic terms of bankruptcy. Um, so, obviously, with the bankruptcy, there are certain chapters and provisions that apply to consumers, and certain chapters that apply to entities or businesses. So, we'll start with the definition of a consumer. So, when we say consumer or consumer debtor, we're talking about the person whose debts arise primarily from the purchase of goods for personal or household use. Generally, goods for consumption as opposed to goods for the operation of an enterprise. All right, so that's what a consumer is. Every bankruptcy will have a bankruptcy trustee. And you can think of the trustee, as the manager of the bankruptcy. And they have some rights. We'll talk more specifically about all of their rights. Excuse me. But the trustee will take possession, custody of the assets in the bankruptcy estate. So the debtor's assets. And they have the legal authority to marshal them, account for them, liquidate them, i.e. sell them for cash, and ultimately pay the creditors in the same manner that the bankruptcy code requires. All right, so that's what the bankruptcy trustee does. The automatic stay is what kicks in after the bankruptcy petition is filed. And the automatic stay prevents creditors from collection actions. All right. Discharge, which is what can happen at the end of the bankruptcy process after the, particularly in Chapter 7. There can be discharge in other chapters as well, but there's typically always going to be a discharge of debt at the end of a Chapter 7 filing. And what happens is, after the bankruptcy trustee has paid all of the creditors, and not necessarily the amounts owed, but just has the bankruptcy estate has run out of money, the remaining debts can be discharged, would be discharged under Chapter 7, might be reorganized or restructured under Chapters 11, 12, or 13. The order for relief, and this really is just a court order saying that the debtor no longer is obligated to pay the debts owed. So if you were making monthly payments or debt service payments, those stop during bankruptcy. Generally speaking, there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, that's what happens with the order for relief. Preference. And so the idea with bankruptcy, we started with the first lecture on bankruptcy, is to treat creditors fairly. So a preference is, if I have $100,000 in debts of 10 creditors, and so I've got 10 creditors, I each owe $10,000 for a total of $100,000 in debt, and I have $20,000 in assets, and I pay one creditor in full, that's going to be a preference, right? Because the result of the bankruptcy system is that those $20,000 in assets would be split evenly amongst creditors. Now, there are other things that come into play, but if we assume they're all unsecured creditors of the same class and level, then they should all get the same pro rata share. And that's a preference. So the bankruptcy trustee, to the extent that they learn of preferences, are going to reverse those out. So as a creditor, if you've received a preference, the bankruptcy trustee will invoice you and demand that payment back. All right. Reaffirmation. So this occurs after a debt is discharged and the debtor says, I am going to reaffirm that debt and pay it. Right? Reassume that legal obligation to pay. And that's reaffirmation. And there's some law about how you go about doing that. The creditor cannot abuse the reaffirmation process, but there may be some reasons to do this, particularly from the business side of things, to maintain a certain business relationship. Like if you're a manufacturer and you need a relationship with a specified supplier, you may reaffirm that debt so that you are able to continue that business relationship if it is in fact vital to the operation and success, long-term success of the business that just went through bankruptcy. Workout. All right, so this is making alternative credit payment terms to satisfy an existing debt. And usually this is as a substitute for bankruptcy. So instead of going through bankruptcy, the debtor and the creditor may work out their debt, create a workout plan, and do that instead of going through or filing for bankruptcy. Okay, so just a quick run through of some terms to be aware of. There's a bigger list in the chapter, but these are the what I deem the most important terms. All right.